Yeah, good evening to all of you. So, in our previous class, we started introduction to Indian polity. We have seen the syllabus. What are the components of the syllabus? We also have seen what are the sources that you have to follow for the syllabus. And we started with the first topic, that is the constitution. So we were talking about how this constitution in India has evolved over a period of time. We started with why do we need a constitution in the first place at all? What is the reason why we need this rule-based governance? We said that the natural tendency of any society is to move towards entropy, that is destruction, anarchy and lawlessness. And because human beings are always guided by self-interest, and this self-interest can easily transform itself into selfish interest. They would exploit others, cheat others, manipulate others. If everyone is doing like that, there cannot be any society also. So we need a rule-based governance. We need to protect the lives of the people, their properties. We need to maximize the welfare of people. For all these reasons, we said that we need a constitution. A constitution will give protection to the rights, liberties and freedoms of the people. From then we move towards these constitutional developments. What are these constitutional developments? We said that our constitution is a result of 200 years of British rule. It was the Britishers who for the first time in India has introduced legal rational authority. Initially it was the East India Company and later the British government. In 1858, after the war of 1857, the entire administration of the country went in the hands of the British Empire, the British Queen. From then onwards, the British Parliament passed so many legislations. We had the Indian Councils Act 1892, then 1909, then 1919, finally the Government of India Act 1935. So all of them ultimately culminated in the present day constitution that we have. So that is what we have discussed in our previous class. If you have any doubts, you can ask from our previous class. If you are not saying anything, it means that either you have fully understood or you have not understood at all anything. Either it is 0% or 100%. Let me make the assumption that it is 100%. Yes, because whatever we have discussed in our previous class, all those things you already have studied as part of your history also, modern history. Yes? Yes, right. I hope whatever you have studied in your history had not become part of history. It means you have forgotten all those things also. So let us proceed and today look at rest of all other things. We will look at how this constitution had come into existence, and we will also look at what is a constitution. Then we will see what are the important features of our constitution. Then we will also look at what exactly is constitutionalism. Those are all the things that in today's class we will try to discuss. So proceeding further, as we have said, in 1946 interim government was formed for a transfer of power from the British government to Indians, and elections were held to the central legislature. In those elections, a Congress party emerged as victorious. Jawaharlal Nehru had become the Prime Minister. After we got independence, that central legislature was converted into constituent assembly, constitutional assembly. It was given the responsibility of formulating the constitution for the country. So this central legislature in those days had performed, it had performed two different types of functions. One is as a parliament, as a legislature, it was making the laws, rules and regulations for the country. Second, it was also formulating the constitution for the country. So the question here is that why should we have a constitution, that too a written constitution? The question that had come up is why should we have a constitution and also a written constitution? This is where we have to remember again our past history, right? We have to remember our past history. India, as we have mentioned, is an ancient nation, but a very young country. So there were so many problems at the time of independence, if you look at it. One is partition of the country on communal grounds. Second one is there were so many this problem of integration of princely states. More than 600 princely states were there. All of them were to be integrated into Indian Union. And the third thing is that we never had experience with democracy. In all our 5,000 years of our history, we never had any kind of experience with democracy. Forget about India. No other country had experience with democracy except United Kingdom. United Kingdom had seen this evolution of democracy over a period of 800 years, from 1200 to the present times. Otherwise, almost all the countries in the world had what you call only dictatorships. Even United Kingdom also had only dictatorship, but it had seen slowly this evolution of democracy, right? So first of all, what exactly is this democracy? What is democracy? So let us try to look at all of them one by one, to have a conceptual clarity before we can proceed with everything. As we have mentioned, why do we need any kind of institution? Why do we need any kind of government? Why? Because if people are given complete freedom, if people are given complete liberties, is it possible to run any society? Obviously not. As we said, the natural tendency of any society is to move towards entropy. So we need to prevent this negative entropy. We must promote positive entropy. That is how these governments had come into existence. In the initial stages of our civilization, we had feudalism. From there, we moved on to what is called monarchy. What is this monarchy? It means that mono means single. It is a system. It is a system wherein all the power is concentrated in the hands of a single person. It is a governance system wherein the entire power is concentrated in the hands of one single person. That single person is the king or the emperor. The king or the emperor, right? And he had all the powers. What do you mean by all the powers? He had legislative powers, executive powers, and judicial powers. This is also what we call a dictatorship. What do we mean by that? The king has absolute power to make laws, has absolute power to make rules and regulations for ruling the country. Whatever the king would say automatically become law. Whatever he says. He has the power to implement all of them also. He has the power to implement all of them. Again, absolute powers. And tomorrow, if there is any problems, any conflicts, who will decide those conflicts? King only. That is what we call judicial powers. the king also had judicial powers. That means if you look at the present day, king is legislature, king is executive, and the king is also judiciary. If you look at in India, king is the president, king is the prime minister, king is the parliament, king is the chief justice, king is also the supreme commander of armed forces. Everything is king only. That is what we call monarchy, wherein the entire power is concentrated in the hands of a single person. And in this kind of monarchy, you have only dictatorship. What does it mean? Whatever the king would say, would become law. He would dictate a dictatorship. He would control, he would regulate, he would dictate the lives of the people. Do the people have any kind of freedoms or rights? No. People do not have any kind of freedoms or rights. And this kingship is mostly what is called hereditary in nature. What does it mean? The son of the king would automatically become the king. Son of the king would automatically become the king. When we say king had absolute powers, that means he does not have to compete with others when it comes to powers. Everything is concentrated in the hands of the king. All the powers are concentrated in the hands of the king. That is what we say. So all over the world, for almost 5,000 years of our civilization, we only have seen this monarchy or kingship. You must have studied in your medieval history also. You look at Mughal emperor. He started with Babur, then Humayun, then Akbar, so on and so forth. It was nothing but hereditary in nature. And all of them had complete powers, absolute powers. Right? People simply could not do anything. For example, Shah Jahan had spent lakhs of rupees of taxpayers' money, people's money, for constructing a Taj Mahal, a graveyard. Yes, Taj Mahal is nothing but a graveyard, right? Right? Yes, whatever we want to say, you can say it, but at the end of the day, it is a graveyard, right? So first you kill people and then say that it is a symbol of love. That's a different thing, right? Then did the people ask Shah Jahan, why are you spending our money to construct this graveyard? Can anyone ask Shah Jahan? No. If someone asks, what happens? They will also be buried under the same graveyard. They will also be buried under the same graveyard. We don't know how many of them have been buried also. Right? That is what we say dictatorship. That is what we say dictatorship. People simply do not have any rights or freedoms. People simply cannot question their government. There is no accountability. Whatever the king says, it will become law. And whatever that comes to his mind will be implemented. Nobody can question. Nobody can ask any kind of questions. That is what we say absolute dictatorship. All over the world, please remember, not only in India, all over the world, except in United Kingdom, wherein this democracy has evolved over a period of time. So what happened? If you again look at the history of human civilization, one of the major events that had taken place in the history of human civilization is this industrial revolution. Have you studied world history? Okay, the industrial revolution. The first phase of industrial revolution took place in 1750s. Second phase took place in 1850s. This industrial revolution has led to drastic changes in the political systems of the countries around the world. It led to the emergence of what is called democracy in place of dictatorship. It led to this democracy in place of dictatorship. So what is the difference between a democracy and a dictatorship. What is the difference? These are all the things which we have to understand in a simple manner, because our entire polity is about the functioning of our democracy only. So what exactly is this democracy? In dictatorship we have said that who has absolute power? King or the emperor. In dictatorship the king is sovereign. In dictatorship we say that the king is sovereign. That means there is no one above king. King has absolute power. King has complete freedom to do whatever he wants. Is there anyone who can limit the power of the king? Not at all. He can do whatever he wants. Maybe in our past life also we must have been dictators. That is the reason why this life we are paying the price by being slaves. Right? So, a king could do whatever he wants. Nothing can stop the king from doing whatever he wants. That is what is called sovereignty. Sovereign. There is no one above the king. And people simply did not have any kind of rights or freedoms. The king can take away all your rights and freedoms. We cannot question the king. People were only what you call them as a subjects. They did not have any kind of freedoms or rights. They were only subjects. Right? They were only, you can say, if you want, slaves. Slaves of the king. King tomorrow comes and says that I am taking away all your property. Can you say anything? If you say anything, he will take away your life also, apart from property. That is what we say dictatorship. Right? Take the case of right now, this communist China. China has dictatorship. They don't have any kind of democracy. Their people don't have any kind of rights. The government says that tomorrow we are coming out with an infrastructure project in your locality. You have to give up your property, land. The government gives you two choices. Either give up your land or give up your life. Completely democratic. Right? Either give up your land or give up your life. That is what we say dictatorship. That is what we say dictatorship. Wherein the ruler can say anything, can do anything. Right? After industrial revolution, as we have said, most of the countries in the world had seen the emergence of democratic systems. What exactly is this democracy? It is a political system wherein it is the people who are sovereign, not the ruler. It is the people who are independent, who are sovereign. That is what we say. What do we mean by that? What do we mean by sovereignty of citizens? What does it we mean by that? What exactly is the meaning of this word sovereignty of citizens? So what we are saying here is that people have the freedom to take decisions and implement decisions. They have the freedom to take decisions and implement decisions. And in democracy, the ruler is accountable to people. He is accountable to people. The ruler is accountable to people. In what way the ruler is accountable to people in a democracy? How the ruler is accountable to people in a democracy? Through what is called electoral process. Through electoral process. After every 5 years, elections are held. If we are not satisfied with the performance of the Prime Minister, we can select some other person. If we are not satisfied with the performance of the Chief Minister, we can always opt for another Chief Minister, another political party. So, in a democracy, these rulers, they exist in power only for that period of time till they enjoy the confidence of the people. And that is where accountability comes into picture. On the other hand, if you go back to dictatorship, can you see that the king being made accountable to the people? No. For how long the king will be there in that position? For how long the king will be there in that position? As long as he is alive. Aurangzeb, was the emperor of India for more than 50 years. 50 years. Till he died. I think he died when he was around 94 years. Pardon? Yes. Till he died. Was Aurangzeb elected by the people after every 5 years? No. Every year he would only kill people. Right? That is what. So the most important thing about democracy that we say here is that when it comes to democracy, the ruler is always accountable to the people. And the ruler has to get himself elected by the people continuously. That is what we say about democracy. And that is the reason why we say that in democracy people are sovereign. There is no one above people. The rulers, they can stay in power only till that period of time, they have the confidence of the ruler, people. That is what we say, democracy. Another important feature of this democracy, we say, is that democracy, the essence of democracy is what we say, rule of law. A very, very important concept in our entire constitution and polity. Entire constitution, polity can be defined with this concept called rule of law. So what is exactly this rule of law? We don't know anything. What exactly is the rule of law? How can we explain this rule of law to say an innocent, ignorant person? How do we put this rule of law? How can we explain it in a very simple manner? We say that the rule of law, the essence of rule of law simply is equality before law. Simple. That means everyone is equal in the eyes of the law. Everyone is equal. There is no difference between a rich person and a poor person. There is no difference between a person from North India or South India. There is no difference between a Hindu and Muslim. There is no difference between an upper caste or lower caste. Everyone is equal in the eyes of law. The law treats every person in the same manner. Equality. Do we have this kind of a concept of rule of law during say dictatorship? No. The king is always in absolute sovereign power. Whatever the king would say would automatically become law. The king can easily discriminate between the people. The king can always pamper some people. The king can take action against other people. Everything can be done by the king according to his own discretion. Whatever that comes into his mind would automatically become a law. Whereas when we talk about democracy, we say that it is a rule of law. The entire democracy functions on the basis of rule of law. And this essence of rule of law, we say, is a separation of powers between legislature, executive and judiciary. The essence of rule of law is what we call separation of powers, clear-cut separation of powers between legislature, executive and judiciary. Again, go back to dictatorship. In dictatorship, what we have said, the king would make laws, the king would implement laws, and the king would also sit on the judgments. Tomorrow any problem comes, who is the chief justice? King. Who is the parliament? King. Who is the prime minister? King. Who is the army chief? King. Everything. That is what we say. In dictatorship, there is no rule of law. Whereas in a democracy, these powers are divided. For example, legislature, our parliament is responsible for law making. Our executive, council of ministers, they are responsible for implementation. And our judiciary is responsible for interpretation of laws. That is what we say about democracy. Because if all the powers are there in the hands of one single person, if all these powers are there in the hands of one single person, what happens? Automatically, it becomes a dictator. In a dictatorship. Take the case of British rule in India. All these powers were in the hands of the Governor General. And before that, take the case of the kingdoms in the country, the emperors in the country. All of them had absolute powers. They can do whatever they want. Now, we have, as part of democracy, we say that, as part of democracy, we say that, can the prime minister sit on the judgments? No. And who can give the judgments? Judiciary. Can the judiciary punish the prime minister? Yes. Judiciary can punish the prime minister. Can judiciary send the chief ministers to jail? Yes. That is what we say, rule of law. For example, some chief ministers in India had been sent to jail by our judiciary on corruption charges. Right? They have been sent to jail on corruption charges. Right now, you can see in a Delhi deputy chief minister, he had also been sent to jail. That is what we say. That is what we say. That is what is called the rule of law. Can anyone send the king to jail? Can anyone send the king to jail? Obviously not. That is what we say democracy. So that is the reason why we say that in democracy, everyone is equal in the eyes of law. That is what we say, equality before law. Howsoever high you may be in your position, the law is always above you. That was the reason why in 1975, Allahabad High Court had disqualified the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to be a member of Parliament. That means judiciary can disqualify even the Prime Minister also. That is what we say rule of law. And that is what we say democracy. Everyone has to follow strictly law. And tomorrow when you are voting, do you have complete freedom to decide your choices or not? Yes. I don't know how many of you have voted. Have you ever voted in elections? Very good. So I am not asking you to whom you have voted. That is your personal choice. I have also voted mostly for myself only. Since I did not like any other candidates, I have voted for myself. Since my name was not there on the EVMs, so I said that nota. Right. Before that, ballot papers were there. You can write your name also, no problem. Right. So that is what you can. Nobody can stop you from exercising your choices at the time of elections. That is what we call sovereignty of citizens. People have complete independence, complete freedom to elect their representatives. And after 5 years, if they are not satisfied with their performance, they can vote to someone else to power. This is what we say about democracy. And democracy is always about accountability. Democracy is always about sovereignty of citizens. Democracy is always about, rule of law. It is always about separation of powers. As I said, Take the case of a communist China or Soviet Russia. Russia right now is fighting war with Ukraine. Can the people of Soviet Russia come onto the streets and protest against their government, saying that we don't want this war? No. If they come onto the streets and they protest, then what happens? First they will be killed before Ukrainians will be killed. That is what happens. Take the case of, as I said, communist China. They have imposed strict lockdown for almost 2 years continuously. People were not allowed to come out of the houses. Could the people of China do anything? No. Why not? Why not? Dictatorship. Dictatorship. Once the government says something, you have to follow it. Otherwise, what will the government do? You will be peacefully killed. In a democratic, peaceful manner, you will be killed. It is as simple as that one. Right? On the other hand, you can see in India, when you are not satisfied with the policies of the government, what you can do? You come onto the street and protest against the government. That is the right that is given to us by our constitution. And that is the reason why we need a constitution. We need a constitution because it protects the freedoms of the people. It protects the rights of the people. It ensures that the people are not discriminated. It also ensures that the governments are made accountable to the people. For all these reasons, we need a constitution. And these democratic governments are possible only with a constitution. That is what exactly our constitutional forefathers have realized at the time of formulating the constitution. They said that let us have a written constitution wherein we can mention all the things that we have spoken about now in the constitution. Why did we opt for a written constitution? For the simple reason that, as I have mentioned, we never had any experience with democracy in all our 5,000 years of our history. So we don't know how this democracy functions. We don't know in the future generations how will they can manipulate this democracy. That is the reason why they said that let us put everything in writing. If something is there in writing, you have to follow it. So that is the reason why they said that let us have a written constitution. And our constitutional forefathers, they have taken, as I said, almost 3 years, 2 years, 11 months and 18 days to frame the constitution for our country, to formulate. So why did they take such a long period of time? Because they wanted to give the people of the country, the future generations, the best of the constitutions in the world. Because they know that success of democracy depends only on a very well written constitution. And what exactly is a constitution then? What exactly is a constitution then? A constitution, is it a mere rule book or a statute book? No. A constitution defines the wishes of the people. It defines the soul of the country. It defines the demands and the dreams of the people. What people are expecting from their governments. What they can expect when it comes into force. So what are the major demands of the people? For example, you are also a citizen of the country. What are you expecting from your governments? What is your expectation from the government? Pardon? No expectations? Right. First and foremost, the government should protect your life. Right? As we have said. Otherwise, what happens? Darwin's principle. Right? A person who is more physically strong than you, he can dominate you, he can exploit you. Right? You want and he can kill you. You want protection to your life and you want protection to your freedom. That is what people are expecting. Then what else do they expect from the governments? Life, freedom, liberty. Then you must also have the freedom to speak your own mind. Freedom of speech. Right? You must have the freedom to criticize the governments. You must have the freedom to express your opinion, views. You must have the freedom to say whatever you want. These are all part of what we call basic human rights, which are given to us by nature. So when we take birth, we are independent. Right? There are no limitations. When we live all through our life, we must retain that kind of independence. And that is what we are expecting from the governments. We want the government to work for our welfare. Tomorrow, there is some kind of disaster like, say, Corona. You want the government to come to your rescue. You want the government to give you the vaccines. You want the government to take preventive measures. You want the government to save your life and properties. And in our constitution, we have mentioned all of them. That is what we say, the dreams, the wishes, the needs, the desires of the people. And a constitution also defines the relationship between the citizens and the state, the government. Right? So what is the relationship between the people and the government? What kind of relationship is there between us and the government? What kind of relationship is there between us and the government? We have the rights. We have the rights, and the government has the responsibility to protect those rights. For example, as I said, the right to life. Government must protect my right to life. Nobody should come and take away my life. Nobody should come and exploit me. Nobody should discriminate against me. And these are all the rights that our constitution has given to us. And it is the responsibility of the government to protect those rights. We have elected the government. Why did we elect the prime ministers and chief ministers? What is the reason why we are electing them? We are electing them because we believe that they can fulfill all these responsibilities that the constitution has mentioned. They can protect all the rights that our constitution has given to us. That is the reason why we have elected them. We have given them so much of power to make sure that our life, our freedoms, our properties, our welfare is taken care of by the government. So the constitution basically defines this relationship between the citizens and the state. That is why we need a constitution. And another thing that we say about constitution is that, as Jawaharlal Nehru, while speaking in the Constituent Assembly, also has said that, he said that a constitution is not a mere rule book, a statute book. Constitution does not mean articles, and constitution does not mean rules and regulations. Constitution does not mean legislations. Constitution does not mean provisions. What is a constitution then? He said that a constitution defines the soul of the nation. It defines the soul of the nation. It defines what the nation stands for. What the nation stands for. As a country, what do we stand for? We stand for rights of the people. We stand for equal opportunity societies. We stand for protecting the freedoms of citizens. We stand for what is called rule-based governance. Ultimately, we stand for sovereignty of our citizens. People are always sovereign. That means there should not be anyone above people. That is what we say, the soul of our nation. That is what our constitutional forefathers have envisaged. They said that this constitution that we are formulating for ourselves, it reflects these demands, desires, dreams, wishes, needs of the people of the country. Why? Again, go back to that time of independence. Especially, the Britishers had ruled India for 200 years continuously. In those 200 years, people were not given any basic human rights also. Indians were discriminated in their own country. Indians were not allowed to enter into those areas where Britishers would reside. For example, take the case of this Taj Hotel in Mumbai. Right? What is the reason why Tatas have constructed this Taj Hotel in Mumbai? Tata was not allowed to enter into the clubs which were owned by the Britishers. They used to say that Indians and dogs are not allowed. That is how they treated us in our own country. That is how they treated us. And you protest against the government, immediately you will be sent to this Andaman jails. There is something called Kalapani. And you further protest, you will be hanged till death. It was Bhagat Singh. Right? That is what. So we have suffered so much in the hands of the Britishers. We have suffered so much. In our own country, we were treated as useless. We were treated as secondary grade citizens. We were not given any kind of respect, self-esteem. We were never treated as human beings also. Even animals got more respect compared to human beings. And that is the reason why our constitutional forefathers have said that let us give all those rights which we could not enjoy in our lifetime. All the members of Constituent Assembly, please remember, all of them suffered in the hands of the British administration. All of them have suffered. Jawaharlal Nehru had spent almost 18 years in jail. Everyone, Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, you name it, all our freedom fighters had spent years and years together in jails. And what was their crime? They were asking for independence. That is the reason why our constitutional forefathers have said that come what may, we wanted to make sure that the future generations would not suffer the way they had to suffer. They wanted to make sure that future generations will have all kinds of rights, all kinds of privileges, all kinds of comforts. See, the thing is that we have so much of democracy in our country. That is the reason why we do not recognize the value of democracy, the independence, the freedom. On the other hand, go to some of these dictatorship countries. Till recently also in Iran, women were not allowed to drive. And you must have seen in Iran recently, a woman, she wanted to cut her hair, and the kind of punishment that was given to her. That is where we will we will realize the essence of democracy. Right? On the other hand, in India, you have complete freedom. You have complete freedom to do whatever you want. When you have something in abundance, you don't realize the importance of it. In India, since we have so much of freedom, that is the reason why we don't realize. On the other hand, if you go back, our constitutional forefathers, since they did not have any of those things in their lifetime, that was the reason why they considered them to be the most valuable things. They have included all of them in the constitution. And they said that future generations in India again should not go back to dictatorship. They said that under no circumstances should India go back to dictatorship. And that is the reason why they said that let us have a written constitution which makes it impossible to turn the country into a dictator. Let us have a written constitution so that Nobody can change it. Nobody can amend it the way they like to transform democracy into a dictatorship. That is the reason why they had given so much of independence to our judiciary, to protect our lives, freedoms and rights. That's why we have a constitution. Because only a written constitution can protect democracy. Only a written constitution can protect the lives of citizens, freedoms of citizens, rights of citizens. And that is the reason why our constitutional forefathers have said that they would never make any kind of compromise with democracy. They would never make. Why? Because as we have said, all through their life they suffered in the hands of brutal dictatorship. British rule in India was completely brutal. That is the reason why you can see these films like Triple R becoming so successful, because they had depicted the kind of the rule that was there during the British times. And please remember, during the British times it was much more severe than what it was shown in the film also. It was much more severe because there is nothing like rule of law. There is nothing like rule of law. Anyone who protests against the government, immediately they would be severely beaten. For example, take the case of Lala Lajpat Rai. He was so severely beaten that ultimately he died also. Why? Because it was dictatorship. Right? And the worst thing is, take the case of this Jallianwala Bagh incident. People were peacefully protesting, and General Dyer, he went there and he ordered firing on the people. That is why we need a democracy. That is the reason why our constitutional forefathers have said that let us have a written constitution. Right? So let us take some of these things in our notes. Right? And then we'll also look at other constitutional developments also. Right? Write down. What did you write in the last class? Why do we need a constitution? Right? India has opted for a written constitution. Here, the heading is what is a constitution? What is a constitution? What is a constitution? What is a constitution? You can write. Yeah. Obviously, that is why we say that the three pillars of democracy are legislature, executive and judiciary. The fourth pillar can be media. Why we are not including? Because when we talk about the state, we say that the three organs of the state are legislature, executive and judiciary. Rest of them complement these things. Rest of all, take the case of media, take the case of civil society organizations, take the case of NGOs. They all help in protecting and promoting our democracy, which is what this is. With media, media will make us aware about the actions of the executive. When the government is acting in a dictatorial manner, then media will create awareness among the people, so that in the next elections we can opt for a new government. So media would help complement the efforts of these organs of the state. Similarly, media also comes out with the judgments of a judiciary. You can see in the newspaper editorials, some of the newspaper editorials would be criticizing some of the judgments of the Supreme Court, because none of us are perfect. We can keep on committing mistakes. Some of us, then someone has to tell our mistakes. What are the mistakes that we are committing? That is where media comes into picture. So media creates awareness among the people, which is necessary for effective functioning of democracy. That's the reason why we say that the three organs of the state are legislature, executive, and judiciary. So, what have you written? What is a constitution? Right? You can write down a constitution may be defined as the soul of a nation. The soul of a nation. As rightly pointed out by, full stop, as rightly pointed out by our first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. Constitution reflects the desires, wishes, desires, DESIRES, wishes, WISHES, dreams, needs, 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 and the demands of people of a country. It is not a mere MERE rule book. It defines the rights of citizens, and the responsibilities of the state, STATA. It defines the relationship between the citizens and the state. The state is made responsible. To protect the freedoms and the rights of citizens. Next paragraph. Constitution also defines the relationship between the three organs of the state. Including legislature, executive, and judiciary. and judiciary. Right. Next paragraph. India has opted for a written constitution. India has opted for a written constitution for the following reasons. For the following reasons. First, India is an ancient nation. India is an ancient nation, but a very young country. Young country. Young country. Next, in its 5,000-year-old history, next point, in its 5,000-year-old history, India never had experience with the functioning of a democracy. With the functioning of democracy. Next point. Without a written constitution, it would be almost impossible. It would be almost impossible to protect democratic systems. Next, strict implementation of rule of law. Next point, strict implementation of rule of law. Rule of law is possible only with a written constitution. Next, a written constitution. Next point, a written constitution can also help in resolving any disputes or conflicts that may come up in the future. That may come up in future. Right? Next, since next point, since at the time of independence, maximum number of people in our country, were poor and illiterate. Comma, the country could easily go into the hands of a dictator. Go into the hands of a dictator without a written constitution. Next point, a written constitution is also necessary to protect democratic systems. To protect democratic systems. So for all these reasons, they have opted for a written constitution. Either we have already discussed, but let me try to either recall whatever we have said, whatever you have written. So we have said that for almost in our 5,000-year-old history, we never had any democracy. We never had any experience with democracy in all our 5,000-year-old history. So how can we protect this democracy? How can we protect the hard-won freedom? Lakhs of people, millions of people have made the ultimate sacrifice. What was the ultimate sacrifice? They have sacrificed their life also for freedoms and liberties. You don't want to lose that again. You don't want to lose that again. As you have written, people at the time of independence, they were poor, they were backward, they were illiterate. What was the literacy rate at the time of independence? Less than 10%. 90% of the people were illiterate. So tomorrow, through elections, a charismatic person becomes the prime minister, and that person can easily transform democracy into dictatorship. That is the reason why we need a written constitution. Right? Please look at all the other countries that have got independence at the same time as India. As we have discussed in our previous class, after the Second World War, the process of decolonization took place. Right? In all those countries, they started with democracy, but in a very, very short period of time, they went into the hands of dictators. Why? Because they did not have a very powerful constitution. Take the case of Pakistan. Pakistan started with democracy. Very, very short period of time, within 3 years, it went into the hands of dictator. Pakistan also has a written constitution, please remember. Pakistan also has a written constitution. Right? But the constitution is so weak that in Pakistan it went into the hands of dictators in a very, very short period of time. Army dictators. Right? That is what, even now also, Pakistan has only dictator. We had some point of time in Pakistan previously, Imran Khan, the prime minister. What does this inform Imran Khan as prime minister? Did he have any kind of real powers? No, because everything was decided by army. That is what they say. Pakistan is controlled by 3 A's. Either army, America, and Allah. That is what they say. Right? Pakistan is a religious state. It is not a secular state. Right? And of course, Pakistan is the 51st state of America. America has how many states? 50 states. Pakistan is the 51st state. Right now, America is not helping Pakistan. That is the reason why it has collapsed. Right? So they don't have any kind of democracy. They don't have any democracy. Look at all other countries, African countries, sub-Saharan African countries, Latin American countries, South Asian countries. All of them have got independence at the same time as India. It is only India that could protect its democracy thanks to your constitution. That is why we said we need a written constitution. In spite of the fact that at the time of independence, more than 90% of our population are illiterates. The beauty of our democracy is that people still could exercise their choices in a very rational manner at the time of elections. They know whom to select to positions of power. Similarly, they also know when to defeat them also. And all this is possible because we have a constitution. As we have said, constitution defines the relationship between the citizens and the state. What is this relationship? Citizens must have the rights and the state has the obligation. State has the responsibility to protect the rights of the citizens. And constitution also is necessary, a written constitution, to implement the rule of law. It also defines the relationship between the three organs of the state: legislature, executive, and judiciary. And a constitution, as Jawaharlal Nehru rightly pointed out, it defines the soul of the nation. And since we did not have any kind of experience with democracy, that is the reason why we have opted for a written constitution. On the other hand, take the case of something like a country like United Kingdom. They don't have any written constitution. They don't require also. Why? Because their democracy has evolved over a period of 800 years. That is the reason why they did not have any written constitution. So this is why we have opted for a written constitution, and we have been able to protect our democracy thanks to our constitution. Our judiciary has come to the rescue of the people from time to time. Whenever a charismatic person tried to be a dictator, our judiciary had come to the rescue. That is where constitution becomes very, very important, right? Right. That is what we say. Yeah. Why we don't have absolute democracy? What do you mean by that? You mean to say that we don't elect our chief ministers and prime ministers, right? We elect our chief ministers and prime ministers also, because when the elections are held, the political parties will be contesting elections. Political parties will be contesting elections, under the leadership of a person in a political party. The person will be the leader, and tomorrow when that political party comes to power, the leader of the political party will become the chief minister. For example, in Bengal, the Trinamool Congress contested elections under the leadership of Mamata Banerjee, and we know that she would be the chief minister when she comes to power. In 2019 elections, BJP had contested elections. BJP had contested elections under the leadership of Narendra Modi. We know that if BJP comes to power, he will be the prime minister. So we are electing our chief minister and prime ministers also. So don't worry. Pardon? Don't worry. We will discuss all of them. Right? Right. So we will talk about all of them as we proceed, right? Next, proceeding further, we have seen, why do we need a constitution? We also have seen what is a constitution. Then we also have seen why do we need a written constitution? A written constitution. Let us proceed with constitutional developments, all the constitutional developments. As you have studied some of them in your modern history also, right? I will briefly mention them, right? You can take constitutional developments. Write down. Constitutional developments in India can be traced back to constitutional developments in India can be traced back to constitutional developments in India can be traced TRACED back to East India Company's rule. From 1773 onwards, the British Parliament passed regulating acts. From 1773 onwards, British Parliament passed regulating acts. After every 20 years. Till 1853. After the War of Independence in 1857, after the War of Independence in 1857, political power in India was transferred from East India Company to the British Crown. East India Company to the British Crown. From 1858 till 1947, many legislations were passed. Many legislations were passed to bring a constitutional governance. Let me briefly give you some of the important legislations. I think maybe you must have studied them in your history also. Have you studied all these Councils Act, 1861, 1892? I'll just give you some of them from our polity point of view only. 1861 Indian Councils Act. Indian Councils Act had introduced for the first time the concept of separation of powers. The concept of separation of powers. Concept of separation of powers in Indian administration. It has separated the powers of legislature from executive. Next, Indian Councils Act 1892. Pardon? Shall I repeat? It has separated the powers of legislature from executive. Next, Indian Councils Act 1892. Indian Councils Act 1892 increased the number of non-official members in the central legislature. Non-official members in the central legislature. Non-official members in the central legislature. Next, Indian Councils Act 1909. Indian Councils Act 1909 expanded the powers of legislature. Expanded the powers of legislature, wherein the members were allowed to ask supplementary questions. To ask supplementary questions. It also provided opportunity for Indians to become part of a Viceroy's Executive Council. Viceroy's Executive Council. Next, Government of India Act 1919. Government of India Act 1919 has gradually introduced GRADUALLY introduced responsible government in India. Responsible government in India. Responsible government in India. It has introduced diarchy, DYARCHY, in provinces. But this experiment was not successful. Government of India Act 1935. Government of India Act 1935 can be considered a very significant development in the evolution of constitutional democracy in India. evolution of constitutional democracy in India. It has ultimately became the basis of our constitution. So this is what we say, right? As we proceed, we will be talking a lot about Government of India Act 1935 also, because the questions are repeatedly asked. The question says that whether Government of India Act 1935 can be called the most important source of our constitution or not. We will talk about all of them. Next, write down constitutional in a making of the constitution. Next, making of the constitution. Making of the constitution. For the first time, it was M.N. Roy, who has brought up this idea of Constituent Assembly. Finally, the Constituent Assembly was constituted in November 1946 under the Cabinet Mission Plan. The total strength of the Constituent Assembly was to be 389. It was to be 389. 389 were the members of Constituent Assembly. Out of this, 296 seats were allocated to British India. 296 seats were allocated to British India. And 93 seats to the princely states. Princely states would nominate their members. Constituent Assembly had both elected and nominated members. And it had representatives from all sections of society. the first meeting of the Constituent Assembly was held. The first meeting of the Constituent Assembly was held on 9th December 1946. Muslim League boycotted the meeting. Muslim League boycotted the meeting. As it was demanding a separate state of Pakistan. Dr. Sachidananda Sinha, Dr. Sachidananda Sinha, Sachidananda, S-A-C-H, C-H-I-D-A-N-A-N-D-A, Sachidananda Sinha. Sachidananda Sinha, the oldest member of the Constituent Assembly, the oldest member of the Constituent Assembly, was elected as the temporary president of the Assembly. Temporary president of the Assembly. Later, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the president of the Assembly. President of the Assembly. Dr. Rajendra Prasad elected as the president. These are all only prelims questions only. All of them are prelims questions. Sachidananda Sinha was the first temporary president, and later Rajendra Prasad was the president of the Constituent Assembly. Right. Next, apart from formulating the Constitution, next write down, next paragraph. Apart from framing the Constitution, it also performed other functions. It also performed other functions. It ratified India's membership. It ratified India's membership of the Commonwealth in May 1949. It adopted in May 1949. It ratified India's membership of the Commonwealth in May 1949. It adopted the national flag, national anthem, ANTHEM, national song, national song. Next, it elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad as the first president of India. Next paragraph. With the partition of India, with the partition of India, Muslim League members had withdrawn themselves from the Constituent Assembly. With the partition of India, Muslim League members had withdrawn themselves from the Constituent Assembly. The strength of the assembly had come down from 389 to 299. 389 to 299. Next, it had met for 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. 11 months and 18 days, and had conducted 11 sessions. It analyzed constitutions of around 60 countries. It also has appointed a number of committees to deal with different aspects of constitution making. Next paragraph. Major committees include first one, drafting committee, headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Union Powers Committee, second, Union Powers Committee, Union Constitution Committee, were headed by Jawaharlal Nehru. States Committee was also headed by Nehru. States, S-T-A-T-E-S, States Committee was also headed by Nehru. Provincial, P-R-O-V-I-N, Provincial Constitution Committee was headed by Sardar Patel. Advisory Committee on Advisory Committee on Fundamental Rights, Minorities, and Tribal Areas was headed by Sardar Patel. Committee on Fundamental Rights, Minorities and Tribal Areas was headed by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Next, Rules of Procedure Committee was headed by Rules of Procedure Committee was headed by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. By Dr. Rajendra Prasad. So these are all the major committees. Again, they will be asked in our prelims. Who headed which committee? You have to mug up all these things. Next, write down. The Constitution was adopted. The Constitution was adopted on 26th November 1949. 26th November 1949, and it contained a preamble, 395 articles, and 8 schedules. 395 articles and 8 schedules. 395 articles. Right? Very small constitution. Right? 395 articles and 8 schedules. Look at American Constitution. We will studying about American Constitution also. Comparison of Constitution. American Constitution has only 7 articles. Right? You can complete entire American polity in 2-3 days time. Whereas for us to complete the Constitution and polity, it will take at least 2-3 lives. Right? You have to read entire Constitution in this life, which is not sufficient. Take birth again read it, again not sufficient, take birth again. Since it is not sufficient, you will commit suicide. Right? So that is where it is. So I think we can take break here. Right? Yes. After the break, we will proceed to other parts of our Constitution. Yeah. Yes, sir. Any doubt? What is the difference between a nation and country? We will discuss all of them. We will discuss everything in a gradual manner. As I said, the nation is a place where you have people with similar traditions, customs, and cultures reside. Nation can have different types of these traditions, customs, and cultures. For example, take the case of India. From the ancient times onwards, we had so many traditions, so much of diversity. You have so many religions, so many traditions, so many customs, so many ethnicities, so many races. Right? Whereas this country is a modern day concept which has geographical boundaries. Right? Which has geographical boundaries, wherein you have an elected government also. Right? India, as I said, for 5,000 years, it is an ancient nation. If you look at the entire 5,000 years of India's history, it was controlled, by one single government or one single, ruler for a short period of time. Otherwise, it has so many, so many rulers ruling the country at the same time. The sense of nation, the sense of nationhood, the sense of nationalism, patriotism had come to existence in India only during the freedom movement. I gave you the example in our previous class also, if you remember. What is the reason why Britishers could easily occupy India, coming from very far off place in a United Kingdom? Why they could easily occupy the country? Because if you look at that point of time, there was no sense of nationalism or patriotism among the people of the country. If a soldier from, say, Maratha in an empire, if he is fighting a battle with Sikhs in Punjab, and he thinks that both of them are different, both of them belong to two different countries, there was no sense of what is called nationhood in the country. That was the reason why the Britishers could easily occupy our country. And when did this sense of nationhood had become part of our country? When we started our freedom movement, especially with the entry of Mahatma Gandhi. Three things contributed to the sense of nationhood. First one is the railways. Thanks to the railways, people could travel from one place to the other place. They could develop the relationship. Second one is English language. Because with so many languages in the country, is it possible to have a feeling of oneness? Obviously not. Because a person who is speaking, say, Malayalam in Kerala, can he identify himself with another person who is speaking, say, Hindi in Uttar Pradesh? Both of them think that they belong to two different countries. It is the English language that has united. And of course, the third one is the freedom movement under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. All of them have contributed. So, India had become a country, under the British rule. It was a big geographical entity that was ruled by the Britishers. But it was not a free country at that point of time. After independence, we got that kind of recognition, wherein we have a geographical boundaries, wherein you have an elected government. That is what we call a country. Take the case of right now, a country like Iraq. In Iraq you have Kurdish population is there, Kurds. They think that they are part of a different nation, and the rest of them think that they are part of different nation. Like that. Take the case of United States of America. It has so many different cultures, so many traditions, so many religions, so many languages. Right? It is a country, it is a nation of different cultures in a plurality. Whereas, as we have said, when you talk about a country, it must have geographical, clear-cut geographical boundaries, and it must also have an elected government. That is what we say. As I said, we will talk about these things as we proceed with our syllabus. When we start talking about the articles of the nation, articles of the Constitution, when we start our discussion of our Constitution with a preamble, there we will come to these things in a more detailed manner. Yes? Ancient nation. I said that the sense of patriotism and nationalism. Nation is different from sense of nationalism. What is the sense of nationalism? That means people from north to south, from east to west, all of them should think that they are part of a single entity. That it has developed only during the freedom struggle. During the freedom struggle. As a nation means a nation is a geographical entity which has so many different cultures, traditions, and customs, and languages, and everything else. That India was an ancient nation from that perspective. Take the case of almost 5,000 years of our civilization. India is always home to so much of diversity. All the major religions in the world, had their, had their followers in India. So many ethnicities, so many races, so many cultures, so many languages. That is where we say that India is an ancient nation. Right? Yeah. Anything else? Yes? What is the difference between a written constitution and unwritten constitution? Written constitution is written, unwritten is unwritten. Right? Very simple. Right? Yes, as we have said, United Kingdom, it does not have a written constitution. It does not have a proper written constitution like we have, with the preamble, articles of the constitution, so on and so forth, schedules and everything else. Right? Whereas if you look at India, we have a written constitution. When we say that United Kingdom does not have a written constitution, it does not mean that they do not have laws, rules and regulations. They have the laws, they have the rules, they have regulations, they have the statutes, everything is there. But what we are saying is that the conventions they have developed over a period of 800 years have made sure that they don't have to codify all those conventions at one place, like what we have done. In India, we had, we were forced to have a written constitution because, democracy in India is not an evolutionary process. What do you mean by that? It has not evolved over a period of time. How did we get our democracy? After this freedom movement, that is when we have decided that we should have a democracy. Till then, what we had? Dictatorship only. During the British times also, we had only dictatorship. So that is the reason why we felt the need to have a written constitution. Almost all the countries in the world, almost all the countries in the world have written constitution, except United Kingdom. Except United Kingdom. They do not have a constitution which is in written form, but they have a constitution in the functioning of their democratic systems. That is why we say that they have unwritten constitution in the form of the traditions and customs, because they do not require. They do not require. For example, to explain this difference very simply, if everyone knows that after 2 minutes you have to stop near the red light to allow others to pass, then do you require any red light, traffic lights? Not required. Since we do not know, we need traffic lights. Right? That is what we call a written constitution. If you know that after 2 minutes you have to stop, as a convention, that is what you have been doing for a long period of time. Do you require any red lights? That is what we say unwritten. When you know those things, you don't require. You don't need them to put that in writing. In United Kingdom, as we have said, they have developed these conventions for such a long period of time. And that is the reason why they did not require a written constitution. Whereas in India, we did not have those conventions. We did not have any kind of experience with, we did not have any kind of experience with democracy. That is the reason why we said that let us have a written constitution. Let us have a written constitution so that, tomorrow if there is any problem, we can always go back to the constitution. If something is in written form, nobody can change it. On the other hand, if it is a convention, you can say that tomorrow I will not follow it. What can you do? Traditions. For example, the tradition is that we must respect all our elders. The tradition is that you should follow the decisions, orders of your parents. If you do not follow, can they punish you? Tomorrow your parents say that you should do the things the way we tell you to do. To get till you get into services, you will do the same thing. After you get into services, They will say that please marry a person of our choice. Then you will start asking them, who are you? He will start quoting constitution, right to life and personal liberty. Right? If you do not marry the person of their choice, what can they do? What can they do? That is what we say, traditions and customs. Can they do anything? Can they go to Supreme Court or High Court saying that our children are not listening to us? No. On the other hand, if there is a written constitution, they can definitely go. That is why we need a written constitution. Why? Because people in India did not have experience with democracy. That's why we have opted for a written constitution. Right? Any other doubt? Yes. A constitution reflects the ideals and ideology of a nation. That is what we are saying. When we talk about India, what the constitution tells us about India? What the ideology it reflects? When we talk about India, we say that secular, sovereign, socialistic, democratic. This is what our ideology is. India is a secular country wherein the government does not discriminate people on the basis of their religion. India is a democratic country wherein people are sovereign. The government always works towards socialism. That is, the government always works towards removing inequalities. And of course, sovereignty. People are sovereign. This is the ideology that the constitution reflects. This is what our constitution for us always wanted to promote through the constitution. It reflects the ideals and ideology of the nation. That's what we say. As we proceed, we will discuss all of them. Yes. Yes, his question is that when there is a conflict between the judiciary, Supreme Court and the government, how it is resolved? It is resolved with the help of constitution. So I will come to UK also. First, being Indians, first let us study about India. Right? Then as part of comparison of constitution, the last topic that we will be discussing in our syllabus, I will come to UK. I know you like UK better than India, but right. But at least from the examination point of view, let us first learn about India. And another problem is that if I answer all these questions today in our class, tomorrow onwards I will become unemployed. Right? Some other questions we can keep it for future also. And please remember, in Delhi, we do not have any NRAGA also, National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, because Delhi is an urban area. NRAGA is only for rural areas. So I cannot even apply under NRAGA also for job. So just you have to wait for some time. We will discuss all of them. We make a comparison between India and UK. Right? So shall we proceed? Right. Let us proceed further. Continuing with the constitution. Continuing with this Constituent Assembly. What did you write? You have written that the Constitution was adopted on 26 November 1949. Right? That is what you have written. And then write the criticism against Constituent Assembly. Criticism against Constituent Assembly. Criticism against Constituent Assembly. Critics have argued that Constituent Assembly was not a representative body as its members were not directly elected by the people. As its members were not directly elected by the people. As its members were not directly elected by the people. They have also criticized it was they have also criticized that it was dominated by Congress party. It was dominated by Congress party. It was also criticized for the amount of time they had taken the amount of time they had taken to frame the constitution. Right. But these criticisms may not be valid because at that point of time there was no elections on the basis of universal adult franchise. Universal adult, FRANCHISE. What do you mean by that? Not every person was given the voting rights. So it was not the problem with the constitutional forefathers. They were elected with a limited franchise. So we do not agree. With all these criticisms. So this is about making of the constitution. From here onwards, let us move on to the next step, that is important features of our constitution. Important features of our constitution. What are the important features? What are the important features that our constitutional forefathers have identified our constitution with? Let us look at all of them. Of course, all the features that we are discussing now will be the essence of our entire syllabus also. Right? So what are those features? First and foremost, as we have said, we have a written constitution. We have a written constitution. First, let me explain all of them, then I will dictate. First, we have a written constitution. Why we have opted for written constitution? I think we have already seen it. Why we have opted for a written constitution. Then, what are the other features of our constitution? Next one is we have opted for a parliamentary democracy. Parliamentary democracy. At the time of framing our constitutional forefathers have decided that India is always going to have democracy. there would never be any kind of compromise with democracy. And what did we say about democracy? Democracy is a system wherein people are sovereign. In dictatorship, it is the sovereignty of the king or the emperor, dictator. Democracy functions on the basis of the concept of rule of law. The essence of democracy is rule of law. And what is this rule of law? Equality before law. Howsoever high you may be, the law is always above you. Law will treat each and every person equally. Law will not discriminate people on the basis of their religion, caste, region, language, ethnicity, race, and so on. Everyone is equal in the eyes of law. Right? And we also said that democracy is always about accountability. Accountability of the ruler towards the citizens. And we also said that the essence of a democracy is the separation of powers between the three organs of the state: legislature, executive, and judiciary. Whereas in a dictatorship, all these powers are concentrated in the hands of one single person. So they have decided that we will have a democracy, but we had two choices in front of us. One is parliamentary democracy that we have now. The other one is presidential form of democracy. This presidential form of democracy was a feature of American democratic systems, wherein the president had all the absolute powers. Whereas in a parliamentary democracy, the prime minister is the real executive, the prime minister who heads council of ministers, whereas the president is only a nominal executive. He does not have any real powers. As we proceed, when we discuss, we will look at all the reasons why we have opted for parliamentary democracy. We have opted for parliamentary democracy because we already had experience with parliamentary democracy as part of 1935 Government of India Act. So our constitutional forefathers felt that let us go with something which we know, that is parliamentary democracy, rather than opting for something which we do not know, that is presidential form of democracy. That is what we say. Our constitutional forefathers have opted for a known devil rather than an unknown angel. Known devil is parliamentary democracy. We know that it is bad, but we know it. Right? We know it. And whereas we know that we don't know anything about presidential democracy. There are so many other reasons also, as we discuss later. Right? Then what are the other features of our constitution? Next one is we also have opted for federalism. What is this federal form of government? Federalism, federal form of democracy. India is such a huge country with so much of diversity. Is it possible for us to govern the entire country from a single place called Delhi? Obviously not. With so much of diversity. What is common between people of say Kerala and Kashmir? What is common? Their food habits different. Then climate different. Then traditions and customs different. Crops different. Everything is different. Right? What is common? The only common thing is all of us are Indians. All of us are Indians. That is what we say, unity in diversity. Unity in diversity. So our constitutional forefathers have realized very well that such a huge country with so much of diversity cannot be governed from a single place. That is the reason why they have opted for this arrangement called federalism, wherein you have a central government, a union government, and also at the state level you have state governments also. And this federalism basically we have taken from this 1935 Government of India Act, wherein that 1935 Government of India Act has divided the subjects into union list and state list. Union means central only. Union list and state list, provincial list. So, we had to opt for this federal arrangement for the simple reason that it is needed for administrative convenience. As I said, if people of Kerala, they know their problems better. Conditions are different. They should come out with their own solutions. Can we have one single policy for the entire country? Obviously not. So that is the reason why where the problem is, the solution also should be found there only. That is the reason why we have opted for this federal arrangement, wherein some of the subjects we have given to the state governments. For example, agriculture, then law and order, then this health, till 42nd Amendment, education, then local self-governments. All of them are part of state list. The state governments have been given the freedom to make laws and also implement those laws. Well, for the simple reason that you cannot have one single policy for the entire country. We have opted for this federal arrangement. Again, as I said, go back to the medieval times also. Even though the Mughal emperor ruled the entire country, but the empire was divided into many kingdoms, and all those kingdoms had functioned independently. The only relation between the emperor and the king is expected to transfer every year certain amount of money as taxes. Otherwise, the kings, local kings, could run the country could run their kingdoms the way they liked. In the same manner, after independence also, what we have done, we had given freedom to the state governments to formulate and implement policies under the subjects that have been given to them. For the simple reason that they know their problems better, they can also come out with the solutions. Federalism. This is what our constitutional forefathers have opted for. As we proceed with this federalism, we face so many problems in our union-state relations over a period of time. And even now also you can see there is so much of conflict that is going on between the central government and the state governments. There are so many conflicts, especially in those states which are ruled by opposition parties. You can see there is so much of conflict between the governors and chief ministers in states like Kerala, in states like Tamil Nadu, in states like till recently Bengal, and then states like Telangana. Wherever you find opposition party states ruling, it led to so much of conflict. Very recently in Punjab also, because the governor of Punjab was not willing to summon the proceedings of the assembly for budget session. Supreme Court had to intervene. Finally, the governor had said that I will convene the session of the budget assembly. That is what we have to discuss all of them. What are the problems? What are the issues? What could be the solutions? These are all the issues in federal relations. That is what we have said. Another feature is federalism. Then what are the other important features of our constitution? Next important feature of our constitution is what is called independence of our judiciary. Our constitutional forefathers had given perhaps the most important role to our judiciary. Among all the three organs of the state, legislature, executive and judiciary, they said that judiciary is given the responsibility of protecting the fundamental rights of the citizens. So what is the problem here? The problem here is that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Both the legislature and executive, if they have so much of power, they can always misuse that power. Parliament can come out with a legislation tomorrow saying that we are taking away all the rights of the citizens. If they have majority, the ruling political party, they can come out with any legislation. Then who will protect the rights of the citizens under those circumstances? It has to be judiciary. Judiciary has to protect the rights of the citizens. Judiciary has to come to the rescue of the citizens if there is any excessive use of power by the state. For example, you are a police officer. You don't like a person, just go there and for fun kill him and say that it is a encounter. After killing you, they will say that you are Naxalite come, terrorist come, everything else. Can the state take away your right to life? Obviously not. And who has to protect your right to life? Judiciary. That is the reason why we have this judiciary. Because those who are in positions of power, we have given them so much of power. They can easily turn themselves into dictators. They can easily, you can see that especially those who are in government, they can have so much of power at their disposal. You need someone to protect the rights of the citizens. You need someone to make sure that the other organs of the state would not turn themselves into dictators. You need someone to ensure that there is what is called constitutional governance. That is the reason why from time to time, as we discuss later, Supreme Court had come out with so many judgments whenever they could see this misuse of power by other organs of the state. And this they could do so only because our judiciary is independent. Our constitutional forefathers could envisage what is going to happen in the future. If a charismatic person becomes the leader of the country, he can easily change the constitution. He can easily take away the rights of the citizens. That is where we need a judiciary which is independent of legislature and executive. And that is why our constitutional forefathers have said that one of the important features of our constitution is this independence of judiciary. Then what are the other features? Next important feature of our constitution. In fact, this is what we say. Our entire constitution can be defined in terms of only one thing: fundamental rights. It is all about fundamental rights. The entire constitution is about how to protect the fundamental rights of the citizens. As we discussed with fundamental rights, these fundamental rights are what we call them as a basic human rights. As a human being, when you take birth, you must have some of these rights. You have the right to live, what is called right to life. You must have the right to live as a free individual, right to life and personal liberty. You have the right to speak, right to freedom of speech and expression. You have the right to reside in any part of the country, because the entire country is a single entity. You have the right to practice your own profession. Of course, you have the right to practice your own profession. It does not mean that you want to become a terrorist, right? So they are not. So similarly, you have the right against exploitation. Nobody should exploit you. Tomorrow in the class, if I say that you have to study for 8 hours a day, immediately you can talk about your fundamental right. Right against exploitation. Right? You can say that maximum, with utmost sincere, honest effort, you can study for maximum 2 or 3 minutes. 2 or 3 minutes in a week. Okay. Anything beyond this? Article 23, right against exploitation. Right? This is what our constitution has guaranteed. Right? So that is the reason why, as I said, our entire constitution can be defined only in terms of fundamental rights. What are the other features of our constitution? Next important feature of our constitution that we can say here is directive principles of state policy, DPSPs. So tomorrow a government is coming to power. After elections, a new government has come to power. How should they run the country? What are the principles that should guide their policy formulation? That is part of DPSPs. That means it provides guidelines for governments to formulate and implement their policies. That is the reason why, as part of directive principles of state policy, we say that the government should protect the lives of children, women, factory workers. The government should focus on decentralizing power through Panchayat Raj. The government should also implement uniform civil code. The government should also protect the environment. Right now you can see we have so much of environmental degradation that is taking place. So when the government tomorrow comes out with policies, those policies should always be influenced by these directive principles. This is the reason why we say that these DPSPs are also part of our features of our constitution. Then what are the other important features of our constitution? Then we talk about the next one is this judicial review. Judicial review. What is this judicial review? Our constitutional forefathers have said that judiciary is given the power to review the laws made by the government, laws made by the parliament and implemented by executive. As we have just mentioned, parliament can come out with any legislation. Tomorrow, as I said, parliament says that we will take away the right to life. We will take away the right to life. Can the parliament do like that? Obviously not. That is where judiciary will come into the picture. They will review the laws made by the parliament and implemented by executive for their constitutional validity. If those laws go against fundamental rights of the citizens, as Supreme Court later has said, if they go against the basic structure of our constitution, under Article 13, our judiciary can declare them as null and void. This is another important feature of our constitution. Next important feature of our constitution is, as we have just mentioned, separation of powers. Separation of powers between the three organs of the state. As we keep on saying, what is the difference between a democracy and a dictatorship? In a dictatorship, all these powers are in the hands of a single person. Whatever the dictator says, it will become law. And he has absolute powers to implement the law. And if he also sits on the judgments. There is nothing like what is called the rule of law. Whereas when you talk about constitution, the most important feature is this rule of law and separation of powers. Clear-cut separation of powers between the legislature, executive and judiciary. And why this is required? It is needed because none of them should become dictator. As I said, if a charismatic person becomes the prime minister, what can he do? He can change the constitution the way he likes, and he or she can become a dictator. How to prevent this dictatorship? That is where we need separation of powers. Let the judiciary be completely separated from legislature and executive, and this judiciary is given the power to review the laws made by legislature, so that the country would not go into the hands of dictator. So these are all some of the important features of our constitution that our constitutional forefathers have strongly believed in. And you can also include as I said, secularism, right? Secularism. India has remained a single country in the last 75 years. Why? Because of the fact that we are a secular country. The government cannot and the government should not differentiate between people on the basis of their religion. And the government will treat each and every religion equally. That is the reason why we have so many provisions in the Constitution, fundamental rights, Articles 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, all of them give these religious freedoms to the citizens. It also protects the rights of the minorities. As I keep on saying, India has been, has retained its unity and integrity only because of the fact that it is a secular country. It is a secular country. Our constitutional forefathers at the time of formulating our constitution could realize the fact that it can survive only when it is secular. And on top of it, unfortunately, the country was also partitioned on communal lines. The country was partitioned on communal lines, on religious lines. And they did not want one more partition of the country, again on the basis of religion. That's the reason why they said that the state, as part of secular policy, secular fabric of the country, the state will not discriminate between people on the basis of their religion. Each and every person will be treated equally, irrespective of their religion. And the state will also take responsibility for protecting the religious beliefs, traditions and customs. And it also gives protection to the minorities. That is what the essence of our constitution. These are all the features that our constitutional forefathers have incorporated in our constitution. You can take down all of them. Important features of our constitution. First one is written constitution. Written constitution. Second, parliamentary democracy. Parliamentary democracy. Third, federalism. Third one is federalism. Fourth, independence of judiciary. Independence of judiciary. Fifth, fundamental rights. Then directive principles of a state policy, DPSP. Then judicial review. Judicial review. Then a separation of powers. And if you want, you can add one more, rule of law. Rule of law. As I said, we will discuss all these features in an in-depth detail as we proceed with our syllabus. I am just only introducing them now, but we will be discussing all of them. You can add one more thing, secularism. This covers our entire syllabus. It covers our entire syllabus. Someone is asking how independence of judiciary is different from judicial review. We will discuss all of them. Again, please remember, if I discuss everything today, right, tomorrow I will become right. So that is the reason why we will go through all of them in a step-by-step process. We will start from the 0 and go to 100. Right? So these are all the features. I have just only given you a brief introduction about all these features. As we proceed, we will discuss all of them. So proceeding further, let us write a few words about democracy, because we cannot discuss about constitution without knowing what exactly is democracy. Yes, people have so many doubts. Sir, we are saying that India is a union of states. Then how can we say that it is a federal state? As I said, wait for some time. I will solve all your doubts. Right? If you don't have any doubts, I will create doubts in your mind and solve them also. So don't worry, we will take care of all those doubts. India is described as a union of states, then how can we say that federalism is a part of our features of our constitution? We will discuss all of them, right? So don't worry. So it has taken our constitutional forefathers almost 3 years to write the constitution, and we are taking only 40 days to understand the entire constitution. So you can wait also, right? Otherwise we will not be doing justice to our constitutional forefathers. They have taken 3 years and we are doing it in only 40 days, and you are saying that everything should be done in one single day, right? They should not feel bad that we have written such an easy constitution that people are understanding it in only one day. Let them also, let their souls also, live in peace. So let us give them their due also, saying that they had come out with a great constitution, which is very difficult to understand. That is the reason why we are taking so much of time also. So we will look at all of them. Just wait for some time. Yes, democracy. Write down democracy. For a long period of time, countries around the world had only witnessed dictatorship in the form of monarchy, monarchy. In dictatorship, the ruler had absolute sovereign powers. That is, he could frame laws, FRAME, laws, LAWS, implement them, and also pronounce judgments, pronounce judgments, judge, pronounce judgments. That means he can deliver verdicts, right? That is what Supreme Court does. People did not enjoy any rights or freedoms. They did not enjoy any rights or freedoms. Next paragraph. With industrial revolution, dictatorship was replaced by democracy. Democracy is a political system. Wherein people are sovereign. SOVEREIGN, sovereign. Important features of democracy include important features of democracy include first, it is based on the concept of rule of law. It is based on the concept of rule of law. Second, equality before law. Equality before law. Third, sovereignty of citizens. Sovereignty of citizens. Fourth, accountability of elected governments. Accountability of elected governments to citizens. Next, clear-cut separation of powers. Clear-cut separation of powers. Clear-cut separation of powers. Clear-cut separation of powers between the three organs of the state. The three organs of the state. Next, freedom of citizens. Freedom of citizens to exercise their choices. To exercise their choices. So this is what broadly we say democracy. As we have mentioned, in democracy, it is the people who are sovereign, but not the rulers. It is not the rulers. A prime minister is not sovereign, it is the people. Why? Because we are electing prime minister. And if we are not satisfied with the performance, we can remove. So they are accountable to us. And they must carry on administration strictly according to rule of law. Everyone should be equal in the eyes of law. So that no person can have extraordinary powers. We give the example. Since we have democracy, since we have rule of law, there were situations wherein the chief ministers have been arrested and former prime ministers have been sent to jail also. Can you imagine these kind of things happening in a dictatorship? Obviously not. So this is what we say about democracy. So proceeding further, we have seen why do we need a constitution. We also have seen what is a constitution. And we also have seen why we have opted for a written constitution. We also briefly have seen the formulation of our constitution, framing of our constitution, all the constitutional developments. Then we also have seen all the different committees of our constituted assembly, because this is where the prelims questions can be asked. And we also have seen the important features of our constitution. Let us proceed and look at a very, very important topic called constitutionalism. 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 If I have to define the entire syllabus of our polity and constitution in a single word. It is constitutionalism. That is the reason why every year in our prelims at least 1 or 2 questions about constitutionalism. And for almost all the questions in the main examination, we are writing about constitutionalism. It is such an important word. Let us try to see what exactly is this constitutionalism. Why do we need this constitutionalism? What are the different dimensions of constitutionalism? And we also have to see whether we have a constitutionalism in India or not. These are all the things that let us try to look at. So first and foremost, as we have mentioned, what is the essence of entire democracy? It is all about accountability. In a dictatorship, is the ruler accountable to the people? No. A ruler can do whatever he wants. Can the people ask the rulers? No. Ruler is absolutely sovereign person. As I gave you the example, people could never question Shah Jahan why he had spent so much amount of money. In those days, it was said that almost more than 14 lakh rupees were spent. Why? Because dictatorship. He could spend the money the way he like. Now, can the government spend the money the way they like now? Obviously not. Why? Because they are accountable to the people. They are accountable to the people. So what we say here is that the relationship between the state, we say that the relation between the state and the citizens, the relationship between the state and the citizens is what we say is a two-person zero-sum game. Two-person zero-sum game. Have you heard about this? No, don't worry. Right? If you heard about all these things, what am I doing in the class also? Right? So, what is this two-person zero-sum game? Very simple. This is what normally study in statistics as part of game theory. Let us assume that two people are playing a game, A and B. Both of them have, say, 10 rupees with each, both of them. When do we say that A has won it? When A has, say, 15 rupees at the end of the game. When A has 15 rupees, B will have how much? 5 rupees. This kind of complicated mathematics you can answer. The rest of all the other things I will take care of. Right? All this complicated mathematics. So, what is the gain of A here? How much he has gained? 5 plus 5. And how much B had lost? Very good. And add both of them. Plus 5 minus 5. 55. Right? What is it? Yes, I like your mathematics knowledge. You will be the topper in CSAT. Right? It is 0. That is what we say two-person zero-sum. That means one person can win only at the cost of other person. One person can win only at the cost of other person. Whatever the gains made by one person are equal to the losses made by other person, so that the sum will always be 0. So why are we talking about this? What we are saying is that the relationship between the state and the citizens is a two-person zero-sum game. What does it mean? It means that the state can acquire more powers. the state can acquire more powers only by taking away the rights of the citizens. Only by taking away the rights and freedoms of the citizens. What does it mean? Whenever the government is coming out with any legislation, whenever the government is coming out with any law, what essentially it means? It takes away the rights of the people. For example, either take the case of a legislation like a UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, the government can declare a person as terrorist, and the person has to prove himself that he is innocent. Similarly, take the case of preventive detention laws. Preventive detention, as the name itself indicates, the government is arresting you as a preventive measure. If the government believes that if tomorrow you stay in the society as an independent person, you can cause harm to the society, so they will be arresting you. They will be arresting you. You have not committed any crime. Please remember. When can the government punish you? If you have committed any crime. Here in this case, you have not committed any crime. The government believes that you can commit crime in the future. So they say that we are arresting you before you commit the crime. Because last night we had a dream that, so that is what we say. The basic problem is that the relationship between the government and the citizens is always what is called a two-person zero-sum game. You are earning more money. Immediately the government says that I am imposing more taxes on you. Super rich tax. You are earning more money. And the government comes out with a legislation saying that we are imposing more taxes on the people. And you have more land. The government says that I am confiscating your land in the name of land reforms. Right? So, you can see in all these instances, the government is acquiring more powers only at the cost of the freedoms of the people. The relationship between the government and people is what we call a two-person zero-sum game. Right? And what did we say about our constitution? What is the most important feature of our constitution, as we have mentioned? It is all about protecting the rights of the people, fundamental rights of the citizens. So when the government comes out with legislations, what happens? It always takes away the rights of the people. It takes away the rights of the people. Whenever the government comes out with any legislation, automatically it results in taking away the rights of the people. Under those circumstances, how to protect the rights of the people? Who will protect the rights of the people? What can be done to protect the rights of the people? And then how to prevent this misuse and abuse of power by the government? How to prevent? As I have mentioned just now, some time back, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you have too much of power, then what happens? You can easily become dictator. Easily become dictator. So what should be done? How to limit the exercise of power by the government? Exercise of power by the government. How to make sure that the government will not misuse its powers? How to make sure that we are able to protect the rights of the citizens? How to make sure that the government carries on its administration strictly according to constitutional provisions? And how to make sure that there are continuous accountability mechanisms within the administration? For all these problems, the solution is constitutionalism. For all these problems, you can have the best of the constitutions. You can have the best of the constitutions, But at the end of the day, the functioning of the constitution can be seen only in reality. Our constitutional forefathers had given us fundamental rights. But do the people in the country enjoy all those fundamental rights in reality? That is what we say constitutionalism. Constitutionalism essentially means effectively implementing the ideals of our constitution in both letter and spirit. And this is what we will be discussing in our next class. From now on, our polity discussions will become much more interesting. They will become much more interesting. And as I mentioned, in our previous class also, next class onwards, you please get at least one newspaper, Hindu newspaper. I will tell you, what are the important articles that you have to read. Because most of you, in fact, all of you are beginners only. So you don't know what to read. And you will read, you start from the Hindu, printed and published at Ahmedabad, Bangalore, so on and so forth. Not required. All of them are not required. So I don't think you have got the Hindu newspaper today. Have you got all of them? That is the reason why very few of them have got. So rule of law, equality before law. So let everyone get newspaper, and we can do it from. I think tomorrow we do. Do we have any class? Tomorrow we don't have class. Day after tomorrow, same time, same place. Yes, and the same person also. Right. So we will continue with our discussions on constitutionalism, and we will go on to other aspects of our constitution. Right.